Well, today is March 1st, um, and we're going to be having a little discussion and talk with a close friend of mine, Dr. Lance GARMER, who is now uh, living in Krakow, Poland. Um, and I'm thrilled to have him here today to talk about the Stories of Influence exhibition a little bit and just get some of his views, his feelings about influence, things that might have influenced him, uh, as well as just things that are on his mind. I respect his opinion a lot. He's been a close um, person of mine during the whole project of the Story of His Influence. And while I was putting it together, I was actually running a lot of ideas by him, and he was a great help during the last few years of putting my exhibition together. So, without further ado, as they say, with that big smile from Krakow, how's the weather there today?
Well, the sun came out. It's March 1st, and it tends to be pretty heavy cast sky for about 4 months straight. But
Wow.
today we had some sun come out, and it's supposed to be sunny tomorrow. Still cold, but it's the sun, man. Can't argue with that.
When you say cold, like, is it like in Fahrenheit? What is it?
Mid 30s, and
Mid
then the
30s, yeah, same.
night it goes down into high 20s, maybe mid 20s.
Yeah, today it was cold. The last couple of days we got our first sort of little small snow. We didn't get as bad as the north, but right now it's like spring again. Things are
Yeah.
starting to pop up, and
Oh, lucky you. Well, we have another month or so before that starts here.
okay. Well, the first thing I kind of want to ask you, Lance, is you know, out of all the people whose work and lives have most influenced you, which one is least obvious in your own work?
Least obvious. I notice you ask about people who have influenced me. That excludes an enormous range of non-human influences. Especially, maybe most importantly, like the age in which you're born, the place in which you're born, the travels that I've had around the world. As you know, my experiences in Alaska were profoundly affected me. So there's a lot more than people who influence us. It's experiences but like everyone, I have work that's a profession or an occupation or a mere job. But I'm fortunate to teach it at a university, and that gives me enormous satisfaction and pleasure, and I hope some relevance. But more important is my work conceived much more broadly. I see I don't want to sound too highfalutin here, but I see my work as being in basically two realms. And I think almost everyone has a similar or identical experience. It's work with respect to the refinement of my own character, according to some standards that I understand and have adopted. And then there's my work as observing and experiencing and thinking, I would say, above all. Observing, experiencing, and thinking. That's what I spend much of my energy on.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I like that idea about the thinking part.
Yeah, well, again, we tend to think of work as especially in the West, many people identify themselves with their work. And when we meet people at a party, one of the first questions is, well, what do you do? Or even, what are you? Right? And so we identify a person with the person's social position, the person's social function, which in very many cases, that match isn't really very comfortable. Many people find themselves doing sorts of work that they don't really particularly care about. It's work for which they can just be interchanged. I mean, if the person just falls over dead, that person can easily be replaced by someone else who can do the same function, right? So the idea of work is a little tricky. Right? I mean, what is our work? It's not only what we do how we get our money or our livelihood or even our social identity to a large extent. It's also our work is big.
Mm.
Our work is big. I think if we're looking at things more broadly.
So when you, I mean, like, give me an example. Like, so basically, you might be, you wake up in the morning, and something sparks you. Maybe you'll listen to some music, or I know you're a musician as well. You'll play some music.
Mhm.
Or maybe you'll think about the next syllabus that you're putting together for your class that you've started now in
Right,
Krakow. I mean,
right.
what, how do you flow in and out of that? And
Yeah,
are there any influences that trigger that?
right. Well, regarding the syllabuses and the syllabi and my work teaching, that is something that I notice I carry around with me throughout the entire day, really. I'll find myself thinking about it, planning what I might say in the next meeting of a class, uh, thinking about topics that I need to bring in. Uh, so that's something that I carry with me on and off throughout the day and the evening. Um, of course, I'm triggered a lot by the news lately, which is, as we know, pretty grim. Uh, that that is a daily fight to maintain some sense of, to remain positive in some extent, because the threats that we're facing are, I mean, they're existential, right? If not immediately, then in the near term. And when you think about that, you really wonder, man, what's going down?
What are your feelings about that? I mean, with all the incredible music,
Mm-hmm.
incredible writings,
Yeah.
poetry,
Yes.
food, culture,
The beauties of life.
how can something like this overpower all that?
How can the negative
Yeah,
overpower the good, or the
yeah.
other way around?
Well,
Oh, the
the negative,
negative.
right? Like, this negative stuff is hypnotizing everybody in a way,
Yeah.
paralyzing,
Yeah.
traumatizing. Also, I mean,
Traumatizing.
you
Yeah.
know, um, yeah, I've been
That.
thinking about the trauma of it all.
Yes. Yeah. I think that you're right on the right track about that, because there's something deeply psychological about it. I mean, psychological to the point of spiritual. This as I think I've told you before, this human tendency, almost compulsion, to take one's contingent identity so seriously and to set it as a standard. As I said, I me mine, right? George Harrison, I me mine. My people, my language, my flag, my hair color, right? My religion, my God, my people, my suffering, right? And how people become so wedded to this, and how it's they become wedded to their pain, right? It's clinging to their pain, to use Buddhist vocabulary. And I think that's essentially how the negativity infects the beauty and the good.
Yeah, but prior to the years past, before the Renaissance, um, I guess it was very dark time.
Mhm.
And I don't know that much about it, to be honest, but I was thinking, how did they pull out of that into the Renaissance?
Yeah. Well, during the during the Middle Ages and I think that even before the modern age, say 1750, coinciding around the time of the Enlightenment, the idea that the purpose of life was to cultivate self-fulfillment and freedom and creativity, individual, was an alien concept, if not absent, right? Especially in the Christian world, the idea was that life was really a sort of punishment. It was something that we simply had to get through on the way to ultimate salvation, or damnation. And this idea of, or even the idea of history back, say, 300, 400 years ago, the idea that history was moving in some linear fashion to an ever better, more enjoyable, more productive, more leisureful world did not exist. So these are new concepts in Western thinking. And you see this, as you know, I've spent time in Africa and Ethiopia, and it's a fascinating, different mentality. Their approach to time, their approach to the cycle of the year, their approach to the purpose of life, right? It's much more concerned with now.
About the present, you mean? Like,
Yes, yes. Yes, of course they have political worries and economic worries and all that. That's part of life. But the general tenor of the culture is not so focused on, striving and, right, this Western idea, which of course is very much bound up with capitalism. I mean, capitalism depends on that, right? More, more, more.
yeah, where's the roof?
Making big statements here, I mean, but
No, where's the roof to it all?
yeah, where's the roof?
What's
Well,
the end game? What's the end game?
the roof is caving in, my man.
Seems to be caving in.
The
I
roof
mean,
is
I heard.
caving in.
I think I sent it to you. This guy, Roger Cohn, who's a journalist.
Yeah. Sure, great column.
You're familiar with him, I believe. I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, he what he said, like he's from South Africa, and
Yes.
it was brought up in the interview. Why didn't like a complete uh, civil war happen when in South Africa? And he
Hmm.
said it had something to do with Mandela.
Hmm.
Mandela could talk to at least both sides and
Hmm.
create some sort of movement forward.
Yes.
Which he basically said that's kind of how that happened. And I
Hmm.
and I'm just curious. I'm always asking myself, where the influence that we today, especially with the internet and how we can access things and how you can get a book there if you want,
Hmm.
fairly easily. I guess
Hmm.
any book, I've never had you ask me, well, Todd, could you go get me that book? It seems
Right.
like you can access it somehow. With
Pretty
with
much. Yeah.
with all this again, crosstalk of influence and uh, so many great things that can be happening in the world.
Hmm.
What where does it miss? Where does it how does this, like with Putin? I mean, one guy can trigger so many of these things off. Now he's asking Belarus, and he might be doing things with China.
Right.
And in China's history, apparently, is so much incredible history, and
Mhm.
you know, um, I don't know how it dissipates. I don't know where it loses its power.
Yeah. Yeah. My man, at the end of the day, we stand again and again in front of the question of evil, right? I mean,
That's what this sort of fight is. It's,
there it is.
I mean,
There it is.
that's what they just, I mean, that's what the commentary keeps saying is that
Yeah.
if you don't rid of this energy in Russia, it could really change everything that we've built up to this point.
Yes, the international order. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Which needs help in its own self. It needs
Yeah.
it could use some work. We all know that.
Yeah.
But this thing that he's doing, that he wants to acquire all this land again,
Yeah.
and bring back basically the Soviet Union.
Right.
It's just hard to believe that we're witnessing this.
It certainly is. It certainly is. It's right next door. I go outside every day and I hear as much Ukrainian being spoken as I hear Polish.
Right. Let me ask you another question. Influence comes from people other than individuals working in the same field as your own. Who are some of the people not working in the same field as you have had most influenced on you?
Well,
And it can be wide range. I mean,
yeah. Well, again, if my work is broadly, very broadly defined, to include my life per se, then by definition there are no people who aren't working in the same field as I. See what I mean?
mm-hmm.
We're all we're all living, right? We're all yeah. So I mean, everybody's working in the same field as I am. There are no people who are not working in the same field. That is, at least if they're walking and breathing.
I like that. Yeah.
Their work's done.
Yeah, because the next thing, whom living, but especially dead, you must have liked to meet, and why?
Yeah.
What would you like to say to them, or what would you talk about, or
Wow.
I know this is probably a whole discussion, but is there a few that just come to your mind that you would say, hey, I'd like to bring him into this Zoom with us?
Oh man, oh man. How many musicians, people, just a peasant from first century Rome. I mean, what would their mind be like? Talk with Kant, to talk with so many folks. But again, I think, well, we could start with Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moses. Like, think about this. If we could bring him in here and say, yo, dude, we got some questions here. And if he could confirm the story as we know it, if he could confirm that, then we would have solved the question of the meaning of human life.
Hmm.
On the other hand, if he could not confirm the story as we know it, right? And we're talking about the existence of God and of a moral order, universal moral order, and a purpose for history, right? If he could not confirm the story as we know it, at least in its essentials, in that case, I'd like to talk to the founder of Buddhism, right? And if he turned out to be very different than how we understand him to have been, right? If his message was really different than we believe it was, then the mystery of suffering, it becomes an eternal curse of suffering. I mean, it's grim stuff, because I mean, people are looking for the meaning of life all the time, some type of purpose, right? Like, what is the point of suffering? Why are we dealing with this? Why does anyone put up with this? Why just grab a handful of phenytoin and you're out of here, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting because like in the Torah or the Quran
Yeah,
uh, have had major influences on people.
absolutely.
You know,
What if we could confirm it? Wow. In other words, it would no longer be a question of belief in God. It would be knowledge of God,
hmm
which really then it brings up another interesting question, like is if you don't have to believe in God, if you know God, if knowing God is like knowing 2 + 2 = 4, then there's no longer any place for faith and belief. See, it's just another fact that we know. In which case our exercise of free will of whether to believe or not isn't tested. So, but if the existence of God were known to be for sure, then it would no longer be a matter of choosing. No longer, it would just be like a matter of 2 + 2 = 4. You don't choose to accept that.
right.
It's a fact. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I'd
Um,
like to talk to that dude. Man, I'd like to talk to both of them.
say that again. You'd like?
I'd really like to talk to that dude. I'd really like to talk to both of them. And I'd also like to bring in Bach while we're at it. You know, play me some tunes, man. Let me hear you riff. Explain to me what's going on in the art of fugue.
Well,
Explain to me what's
it's
going on.
it's interesting because I don't know, music with me. Whenever I'd hear music, and I listen to a lot of different kinds of music,
Yes, you do, Todd.
they they help change my headspace.
Mhm.
And they not in a different way. It always brings me grounded.
Grounded.
It makes me grounded. I can hear all kinds of music.
Mhm.
It tends, I mean, it has to touch me basically, but it grounds me. It gives me some groundedness. Uh,
Mhm.
maybe it's because it's a universal language, you know.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
there's no conflict in looking up a word.
Right.
It's which is another beautiful way of learning and studying is through words and through books.
Uh-huh.
Even though I'm a slow reader, but I find that music it can work on a very very deep emotional level.
Mhm.
For me.
Yeah. No, I think for so many people, I mean, it means so much to so many people. I mean, there's plenty of music that I don't care for, and that I mean, when I look at it musically, I sort of dismiss it. But I recognize that for very very many people, that music that I might dismiss is for them very very important and powerful.
Yeah.
And they tie part of their identity to it. It obviously brings many many memories back to them, and just as my favorite music does for me.
Right. But yeah,
No,
I also find that you have to orient yourself to different music. It takes a learning. You have to,
it's
like,
an
when
effort.
I yeah
It's an effort.
when I first heard classical, it was like, wow, what is this? And the
Yeah,
more I listened to it, the more I started to listen to it.
yeah,
And same with jazz, and the same,
yeah.
and same even with hip hop, which I've been hearing people don't really call it music. You
Uh-huh.
know, there's a there they don't recognize it as music.
Uh-huh.
It's more poetic, or that type of thing.
Mhm.
Um, but getting back to the to influence
Right.
of Moses,
Yes. See, I
who
was just, one reason I might have brought that up was last night I had a movie night with Bhavani, and we watched DeMille's The Ten Commandments,
oh my God,
which
yeah,
is, you know, 4 hours long, an amazing epic.
yeah, yeah,
How big can it be with these huge orchestras and cast of thousands, incredible costumes and dialogue? It's a masterpiece, you know. And so I turned him on to that, and our idea was, you know, oh, it's 4 hours long. We'll watch a little bit of it tonight. Man, we ended up staying up until 12:30 at night watching the whole thing.
wow,
So that's been on my mind.
yeah, yeah, it's funny. It's an interpretation, right? But it's
Yeah.
you 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 can sit through that, and if you allow yourself to go into the film, it's fantastic, really. In
It
some,
is. It
yeah.
is the love stories and the, yeah.
Well,
And then
the whole stories, the stories uh, of the Bible,
yeah,
just the whole
yeah,
stories.
yeah.
They just and they seem to reflect a lot of different generations
Uh-huh.
somehow. They can be interpreted into a time then, into another time, even though they're different environments, but the basic story can flow within each generation.
Sure. These are universal themes. You know as well as I do. There's a whole library of Torah commentary. A library, you know,
Yeah, that's awesome. See,
and it keeps going and it keeps going, you know.
and I keep asking myself, how does that um, dilute? How does that dilute the separation of people? Like, well, how did what I mean? Here's a like, for example, the thing in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, here's a guy that I don't know, I have access to his bank account, but I hear he's very wealthy. Russia has 13 time zones, maybe 8 of them you can't really use on an everyday basis, but there's a lot of land there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of minerals and there's a lot of different types of resources there. But what entices this gentleman to continue to overpower uh, the what I would call, uh, the bloodline of wanting to live through poetry and art and music and talk and inspiration?
Yeah. Yeah.
How does I was just curious what your thoughts are. How does that, it's like when you have a toothache or something. Why does that take over your entire body when it's
Right.
just a cavity or a root canal or
Yeah, yeah. Well, Putin is more than a bad tooth abscess. He's at this point. He's
yeah, but people must have seen that coming. I mean, it's
yeah, yeah,
right. I mean, right. I mean, somebody must have seen. I mean, somebody once said to me, "Well, there's two sides to every story."
yeah. But not necessarily both are right.
Right, but what? Right. Okay, there you go. Right, I mean, he must really be feeling paranoid.
Well, you know, that's interesting. You should mention that because there have been there psychological speculations about Putin's worthy predecessor, Stalin, and in short, the guy suffered. Stalin suffered from a disorder that he constantly used the correct word according to these psychological speculations, paranoia. It was as his power would grow, he would actually feel more threatened, and so he was compelled to extend his power even more, which in turn raised the paranoia, you know, even higher. And so eventually he found himself completely isolated, trusting no one, uh, probably incapable of love. Right? This is maybe touching on your question about how we get divorced from poetry and music and friendship and food.
I mean, yeah, it just seems to be, I mean, the whole world right now seems to be on pins and needles,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
and it's really kind of frustrating, in some.
It's frightening. It is genuinely frightening.
Yeah, this other question, suffering profoundly affects everyone. If you are comfortable sharing your experience, plus describe how suffering has influenced your work and perspective, if it has.
Right. Well, again, seeing my work as more broadly as my life. Uh,
That's an interesting question.
well, wow, suffering does so much to us. No, I mean, I've experienced horrific, for me, frustration before. Of course, losing my mother was unbearable suffering. Uh, you know, physical suffering, fortunately, I've been largely spared from so far in my life.
So how do you
Imagine that.
how do you work your way out of it?
Yeah,
Like what do you do as a motivation? I mean,
yeah. Well, I'm of a certain constitution that I'm not particularly good at working through certain types of suffering, particularly suffering related to loss or rejection. And that is the sort of suffering that I generally need to just endure
really.
until it until it until it subsides to a whatever
So
whatever
it does
level. It's
subside.
through the fire, man. It's through the fire. It's through the fire. There is only one way. It's through the fire. I'm aware of that. I mean, I'm intellectually aware of that, and I guess as I do grow older, I am starting to understand the wisdom and the necessity of suffering, the value of suffering. Um, but again, what is my suffering? I mean, I would imagine those folks in Ukraine, right, or in the civil war that happened in Ethiopia, or what happened here 80 years ago, right, with the Holocaust.
Or what happens even
I
with the
mean,
train wreck that
suffering,
happened. The train wreck
suffering.
just happened in Greece.
Yeah, well, that's random stuff. That's
Still,
horrific.
but still, the families and
Yeah, yeah. Random accidents,
okay,
but
random, yeah,
random accidents, just freak things.
yeah,
But like large scale, massive, prolonged, intentionally inflicted suffering. The
yeah,
train wreck happened, but
right,
intentionally inflicted suffering upon people who have they're guiltless.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, yeah, they're targeting civilian targets. It's
yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's incomprehensible, really.
It's incomprehensible, and this is Todd, this is what we call evil, this is what we call evil.
Where does the word evil stem from? Do you know?
Yeah, it comes from the German is übel, and I believe it's related to the word for now. I would have to check this, so I'm going
Yeah,
about
yeah.
on
I'm
a
just
limb
yeah,
here,
just off the
but
cuff.
I believe it's related to the word devil,
Oh, devil.
devil, and there are some consonant changes. A V becomes a B, right? Devil, debil, übel. And that is where we actually get our word, at least in English, double from.
Oh,
Double. And when you think about how does the snake in Gan Eden speaks with a forked tongue, right? Is saying you don't know what is, well, when the snake speaks, it's double. It's yes is not yes and no is not no.
no.
It's mixed. So it's double. So from double, we get devil, übel, evil.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to maybe share with somebody who listens to this, whoever might listen to this, that could be an encouragement to um, to look into mentorship or influence or using?
Mentorship?
Yeah, like like I mean, the idea of mentorship, the idea of somebody who could use mentorship as influence to grow in their life, to be inspired. Um, I mean, maybe a mentor doesn't physically have to be present. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm open to any sort of mentorship. I mean, it could be Bach, it could be,
Yeah. Right.
but something that, is there anything that, I mean, if this was a class and we were students out here, would there be something, sort of an encouragement about opening yourself up to things that could nourish you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, without, nourish you in the sense of wanting to grow and progress and articulate yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a mysterious process. How we come to how we become receptive to influences, how we are ready to so to say receive a message at some point, and where before we might not have been, you know.
I mean, would you
I,
say your mom was someone in that realm for you? Did she have a presence that inspired you?
oh my heavens, yes, of course. I mean,
So it could be a family member.
it can come from anywhere. I mean, we know that it comes sometimes from people you don't even really expect it to come from. Um, it's people touch our lives, which implies that we touch their lives, right? And it's kind of mysterious how that happens. I was thinking, and I'm sure that this has happened to you. I'm sure that this has happened to very many people. Is that you meet someone that you haven't seen for 15 years, 20 years. You've lost contact with that person for whatever reason. Or it could even be a friend with whom you've remained in contact continuously. And then the person will tell you something that you said to him or her that you yourself have totally forgotten about. And that person says, yeah, and when you said that to me, that was like a light went off, in my head. And you say, what? What, like, I don't even remember it. And the person says, yeah, but Ben, you kind of changed my life. You changed the way I thought, I think, and if you change the way somebody thinks, that means you change their life, right?
It's nice.
And so it's weird how you don't know. I mean, like, imagine when it's all said and done, and your time is here. They plop you down on your piece of earth, And then imagine you go up or go wherever, and then you imagine like you get to see what your life really amounted to, like what you really accomplished, the people you pissed off, the people who you hurt, you weren't even aware of it, or the people you benefited or even saved. You know, it's mysterious.
Like that. I
Mysterious.
think that's good. That's a good way of saying it. Um, what would you like your legacy to be? What if
Oh
you,
boy,
what would you like it to be?
my legacy. You
Yeah. What would
put
you?
me in the ground already, huh?
Yeah. Well, yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah, let's face it, right? Let's
If you
face it.
could, if you could dream, you
Yeah.
could dream. It's like if you left and you looked down and you saw
Yeah.
Lance's shadow.
Yeah. Sure. Well, you know, there's of course, you know, wishful thinking that it's or hopeful thinking, let's say. But you know, I think we can to tie this in with influence. I mean, I think that we can understand the term legacy, you know, to be a synonym for influence. You know, what do you want your influence to be? And generally, I mean, I have no illusions of or delusions of grandeur. I mean, I imagine that my existence will be pretty much forgotten not very long after my demise. I mean, that's the way it is. On the other hand, as I said, some people, students, for example, you know, they've spoken with me, you know, after years, and they've told me that I told them something that deeply affected them or changed their minds. And and of course, this is as I just said in our previous question, we don't know. But ideally, I think I'd like to remembered, you know, however briefly, as you know, as having been a fairly decent human being. You know, all things considered. You know, got my sins, man. I'm going to do some burning. I'm going to do some burning. There's some purification. It's got to, you know, no doubt, no doubt. And and now speaking very seriously, you know, I do believe fundamentally, I do believe, and this is maybe what sustains me, or I do believe that there's a moral causality in the universe, a moral causality, and you know, according to which you know, our future states reflect, you know, how we've conducted ourselves previously. And that I have to just I have to abide by that. And if I did not have that belief, gone, then it really doesn't matter. And then influence, no, yeah, so what?
Well, Dr. Lance Garmer, I think that was a wonderful way to say it, and I'm I'm definitely going to think about that and use it. How's that?
Oh,
I'll try to use that.
oh,
So I just wanted to thank you again and for your time and sharing some of these questions that will
yes.
be on the website, on the Story of Influence website.
Oh, wonderful.
It's something that will be growing through time, and I hope that I can interview other people who have been involved with the exhibition to just
Yeah.
give these little talks a little. Maybe it'll trigger something, um, and maybe somebody will hear something in your talk that just might say to you when they meet you in person. Remember that talk you did with Todd on that Zoom? Remember that thing you said about mystery and
Mhm, mhm,
the unanswered question
mhm,
by Charles Ives,
mhm,
piece of music.
mhm. Well, Todd, as I've told you before, you know, you and I have a very deep and special bond. and I love you dearly, and you've influenced me for the better a lot. Love you, my man.